The Native American warriors of old weren't just fighters. They were strategists, leaders, and, in some cases, living legends. They carried the spirit of their people, the wisdom of their ancestors, and the determination to protect their lands against all odds. But here's the kicker. Many of these legendary warriors have been swept under the rug of history, overshadowed by mainstream narratives. No more. This video will uncover the 10 most powerful Native American warriors whose stories deserve a Netflix series. Let's get right into it. Number 1. Sitting Bull, born in 1831 in present-day South Dakota. Sitting Bull, originally named Tatanka Iyotake, was destined for greatness. As a young man, his bravery and skill in battle earned him respect among his people. But it wasn't just his prowess on the battlefield that set him apart. Sitting Bull was also deeply spiritual. He was known for connecting to the sacred and often sought guidance through visions. One of these visions would shape his legacy forever. In 1876, he saw soldiers falling like grasshoppers from the sky, a prophecy that foretold a great victory for the Lakota and their allies. This vision galvanized his people and solidified his role as a spiritual guide and a wartime leader. For the Lakota, Sitting Bull was not just a chief, but a living embodiment of their cultural and spiritual identity. By the mid-19th century, the U.S. government was aggressively expanding westward, encroaching on Native American lands in violation of treaties. The discovery of gold in the Black Hills, sacred to the Lakota, brought an influx of settlers, and the government demanded that the Lakota move to reservations. Sitting Bull refused. He rallied other tribes to stand together, forming one of the largest Native American coalitions in history. In June 1876, this coalition clashed with the U.S. Army in one of the most famous battles in American history, the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Although Sitting Bull didn't directly participate in the fighting, his leadership and vision were crucial to the victory. Before the battle, he led a Sundance ceremony, fasting and dancing for hours until he received a vision of soldiers falling. His vision inspired the warriors, led by figures like Crazy Horse, to fight with extraordinary determination. The result was a stunning defeat for General George Armstrong Custer and his 7th Cavalry. Known as Custer's Last Stand, the battle was a rare and resounding victory for Native Americans in their fight to preserve their lands. Sitting Bull's role in uniting the tribes and inspiring them with his spiritual guidance was pivotal to this triumph. The victory at Little Bighorn was bittersweet. It marked the high point of Native American resistance, but also intensified U.S. efforts to subjugate the Lakota and other tribes. In the following years, Sitting Bull and his people faced relentless pursuit by the U.S. military. Eventually, in 1881, he surrendered to save his people from starvation. Even in captivity, Sitting Bull remained a steadfast advocate for his people. He toured briefly with Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, where he used his platform to speak about the injustices faced by Native Americans. Despite the pressure to assimilate, he never wavered in his commitment to Lakota traditions and sovereignty. Tragically, Sitting Bull's life ended in 1890 during a confrontation with Indian police sent to arrest him. His death came just weeks before the massacre at Wounded Knee, a devastating blow to the Lakota and the broader Native American resistance. Yet, Sitting Bull's legacy endures. Today, he is remembered as a symbol of resilience and defiance. His life story resonates as a powerful reminder of the struggles faced by Native peoples and their enduring fight for justice. From his spiritual leadership to his unwavering stand against oppression, Sitting Bull remains an icon not just for the Lakota, but for all who value courage in the face of adversity. Number 2. Crazy Horse. Known for his brilliance as a war leader and his role in the Great Sioux War of 1876. Crazy Horse's story is an unyielding defense of his people's way of life in the face of overwhelming adversity. Born around 1840, Crazy Horse grew up when the Lakota people's way of life faced increasing threats from westward expansion. As settlers flooded the Great Plains and the U.S. government encroached on native lands, Crazy Horse rose as a leader who refused to compromise his people's sovereignty and traditions. Unlike many warriors of his time, Crazy Horse was not known for ostentatious displays of wealth or status. He was quiet, humble, and intensely focused on protecting his people. His name, Ta Shun Ke Witko, translated as "His Horse is Crazy," reflected his unique spirit and unyielding resolve. Crazy Horse's dedication to the Lakota way of life made him a warrior and a spiritual leader, guided by visions that gave him purpose and direction. Crazy Horse's military prowess was legendary, and his role in the Great Sioux War of 1876 cemented his place in history. The most famous battle of his career was the Battle of the Little Bighorn, where he joined forces with Sitting Bull and other leaders to achieve one of the most remarkable victories in Native American history. Despite his efforts, the Lakota's way of life continued to erode under relentless U.S. military pressure. In 1877, Crazy Horse surrendered to the U.S. Army to prevent further suffering among his people. Even in captivity, he remained defiant, refusing to conform to the government's demands. Tragically, Crazy Horse's life was cut short on September 5, 1877, when he was fatally stabbed during a scuffle at Fort Robinson. He was just 37 years old. His death marked the end of an era, but his spirit lived on as a symbol of resistance and resilience. Number 3. Tecumseh, whose name means shooting star or panther across the sky, was a remarkable leader who lived during a difficult time for Native American tribes. Born in 1768 near present-day Chillicothe, Ohio, Tecumseh grew up watching settlers take over native lands. This created constant conflict, leaving his people to struggle for their homes and way of life. Tecumseh decided he would not stand by. Instead, he dreamed of uniting all the native tribes to protect their lands and traditions. Tecumseh wasn't just a warrior, but a speaker who could inspire anyone. He believed that Native American tribes had to work together to stop settlers from taking over. Instead of focusing on his own Shawnee people, Tecumseh reached out to other tribes, even ones that had been enemies in the past. He traveled thousands of miles, visiting tribes from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. His speeches were powerful and passionate, convincing many leaders to join his cause. Tecumseh argued that land didn't belong to one tribe, but to all native people. If one tribe sold land to settlers, it would affect everyone. He insisted that no land should be sold without the agreement of all tribes. Along with his brother Tenskwatawa, known as the Prophet, Tecumseh also encouraged tribes to return to their traditions and reject settlers' goods, like alcohol, which had caused problems in native communities. Tecumseh's work led to a confederacy, like a big alliance of tribes working together. This wasn't easy. Tribes had their leaders and traditions, and some didn't fully trust Tecumseh's plan. Still, his ability to unite many groups was an amazing achievement. During the War of 1812, Tecumseh joined forces with the British, who were fighting against the United States. The British didn't want American settlers to expand westward, so their goals aligned with Tecumseh's. Together, they achieved important victories, including the surrender of Fort Detroit. Tecumseh's clever planning helped intimidate American troops into giving up without much of a fight in this battle. Despite these successes, Tecumseh's alliance faced challenges. Not all tribes were ready to commit to a fight against the U.S., and some were afraid of the consequences if they lost. Still, Tecumseh's efforts showed the power of what could be accomplished when people worked together. Number 4. Geronimo. One name stands out when you think of powerful leaders who fought for their people: Geronimo. He was a legendary Apache warrior who fought fiercely against the U.S. and Mexican governments. His story is full of bravery, clever strategies, and an unwavering will to survive. Geronimo was born in 1829 in what is now Arizona. His Apache name was Goyakla, which means the one who yawns, but his life was relaxed. Geronimo grew up in a world where survival depended on understanding the harsh desert environment and the ways of the Apache people. The turning point in Geronimo's life was when he was young. In 1858, while his family was away, Mexican soldiers attacked their camp, killing his mother, wife, and children. This event filled Geronimo with rage and grief. He vowed to take revenge and protect his people. From that moment on, he became one of the most feared and respected warriors of his time. Geronimo and his warriors were known for their surprise attacks. They would strike quickly and disappear into the desert before anyone could chase them. They attacked U.S. military posts, Mexican towns, and supply caravans. These raids were not just about fighting. They were a way of protecting their land and showing their resistance to foreign control. Geronimo's courage in battle earned him a reputation as a fearless warrior. One of Geronimo's greatest strengths was his ability to escape capture. For over 30 years, the U.S. Army and the Mexican government tried to capture him, but they were never able to. Despite being outnumbered and facing better-equipped forces, Geronimo and his warriors could use their knowledge of the land to stay one step ahead. They knew the desert well and could hide in caves, mountains, and canyons where their enemies could not find them. After many years of fighting, Geronimo and his warriors finally had to surrender in 1886. The U.S. Army had sent thousands of soldiers to capture him, and Geronimo's people were running out of food and supplies. Even though he was captured, Geronimo's spirit never broke. He became a prisoner of war, but his name and story lived on. Geronimo's legend grew even after his surrender. He was sent to reservations and even appeared at public events like the 1905 Presidential Inaugural Parade. People from all over the world wanted to see the famous Apache warrior. Although he didn't want to be a spectacle, Geronimo used this fame to speak out about the treatment of Native Americans. He called for the return of his people's lands and better treatment of Native Americans by the U.S. government. Number 5. Lozen. Lozen was a remarkable warrior and spiritual leader from the Cherokee Apache tribe. Her story is one of courage, strength, and breaking barriers. Lozen was born around 1840 in a tribe in the southwestern United States. From a young age, Lozen showed that she differed from many girls in her tribe. While many girls were trained to help with household tasks, Lozen was taught how to fight and defend her people, just like the boys. She was strong and skilled with weapons like the bow and arrow, and had a special talent that made her stand out. She was a medicine woman. This meant she had spiritual powers that helped guide and protect her people in battle. Lozen is most famous for her role in the Apache Wars, which were a series of battles between the Apache people and the U.S. military in the 1800s. These wars were a desperate fight to keep their land and way of life from being taken away. During these wars, Lozen fought beside Geronimo, one of the most famous Apache leaders. She was a trusted warrior who earned the respect of her tribe and even the men who fought with her. Lozen was known for being fearless in battle. She fought with a bow and arrow and sometimes used a rifle. She took part in raids against U.S. forces, showing the same bravery as the men around her. But Lozen's role went beyond just fighting. Her spiritual abilities were also important in helping the Apache warriors plan their attacks. She could sense when danger was near and help the tribe avoid ambushes. Number 6. Osceola. Osceola is one of the most legendary Native American leaders, known for his bravery, cleverness, and strong spirit. As the leader of the Seminole tribe during the Second Seminole War, he fought fiercely to protect his people and their land in Florida. Osceola was born around 1804 and grew up among the Seminole people in Florida. The Seminoles were a mix of Native Americans, including Creek people and runaway slaves who had joined them for safety. By the time Osceola became a leader, the U.S. government wanted the Seminoles to leave Florida and move west, far away from their homeland. This was part of a policy called the Trail of Tears, which forced many Native American tribes to move to Oklahoma. The Seminoles didn't want to leave their land, and Osceola became a strong leader who fought back. In 1835, the Second Seminole War started, and Osceola led his people in the battle to keep their homes in Florida. The war lasted until 1842 and was one of the longest and most difficult wars the U.S. faced. What made Osceola stand out was how he fought. Instead of traditional battles, where armies faced each other in open spaces, Osceola used the swamps and forests of the Florida Everglades to his advantage. He and his warriors knew the land well and used it to launch surprise attacks on the U.S. Army. They would strike quickly, confusing the soldiers, disappearing into the swamps where they couldn't follow. Osceola was not just a strong leader, but also a smart tactician. While the U.S. Army relied on conventional battles, Osceola's warriors were masters of hit-and-run tactics. They would ambush soldiers, destroy supplies, and scare the U.S. Army into thinking they could never catch the Seminoles. One of the most famous battles was at Okeechobee in 1837, where Osceola led his people against U.S. forces. Although they had to retreat, they left a lasting impression on the U.S. soldiers, showing that the Seminoles wouldn't give up easily. In 1837, Osceola was captured dramatically and controversially. U.S. officials tricked him by inviting him to a meeting under the truce flag, meaning they promised no fighting. But when Osceola arrived, he and some of his followers were ambushed and taken prisoner. Even after being captured, Osceola didn't back down. He refused to let the U.S. soldiers humiliate him. He was defiant and showed that he would never give up. Some stories say that he even spat in the faces of his captors, refusing to submit to them. Despite being held in a prison in Florida, Osceola's spirit remained unbroken. He continued to stand up for his people, even in captivity. Sadly, Osceola didn't live long after his capture. He died in prison in 1838, probably from illness and the sadness of being captured. Number 7. Red Cloud. Red Cloud, a brilliant and determined leader of the Oglala Lakota, is remembered as one of the most strategic and effective Native American warriors in history. The war named after Red Cloud began because the U.S. government wanted to build the Bozeman Trail Road. This road cut through Lakota lands rich in resources and held deep cultural meaning. Red Cloud knew allowing the trail would destroy the Lakota way of life, so he decided to fight back. But instead of facing the U.S. Army head-on, Red Cloud used clever tactics. He united other tribes, including the Northern Cheyenne and Arapaho, to form a strong alliance. Then he launched surprise attacks on soldiers and supply lines, making it hard for the U.S. Army to stay in the area. One of Red Cloud's most famous victories was the Fetterman Fight, 1866. His warriors tricked a group of 81 U.S. soldiers into chasing them into a trap. Every soldier was killed in the ambush, making it one of the biggest Native American victories against the U.S. Army. Red Cloud's persistence paid off. After 2 years of fighting, the U.S. government realized it couldn't win without spending even more money and losing more lives. They agreed to talk, and 1868 Red Cloud signed the Second Treaty of Fort Laramie. This treaty was a huge victory for the Lakota. The U.S. government promised to stop building the Bozeman Trail and even took down the forts along it. The Lakota were guaranteed control of the Black Hills and nearby lands. This was one of the few times in history when the U.S. signed a treaty that truly favored Native Americans. Red Cloud didn't just win on the battlefield. He also fought for his people peacefully. After the war, he focused on protecting Lakota lands and rights through negotiations and diplomacy. In 1870, he even traveled to Washington, D.C. to meet President Ulysses S. Grant and argue for better treatment of his people. However, the U.S. government didn't always keep its promises, and Red Cloud grew frustrated as more and more Lakota land was taken. Still, he never stopped trying to secure a better future for his people. Red Cloud passed away in 1909, living long enough to see his world change completely. Despite the challenges, he remained a respected and beloved leader. Number 8. Black Hawk. Black Hawk was a courageous leader of the Sauk Nation who fought to protect his people and their land. He was born in 1767 in Saukenuk, a village in what is now Illinois. Black Hawk wasn't born a chief, but his bravery and skills in battle made him a respected war leader. His main goal was to protect Saukenuk, the ancestral home of the Sauk people. Problems began when the U.S. government claimed the land through a treaty signed in 1804. Black Hawk and many others believed this treaty was unfair because it was made without the approval of most Sauk leaders. By 1831, the U.S. government started forcing the Sauk to leave their land and move west of the Mississippi River. Black Hawk refused to accept this. For him, leaving Saukenuk meant losing a piece of his people's soul. In 1832, he led a group of 1,200 people, including women and children, back to Illinois, hoping to reclaim their home. Black Hawk didn't want to fight. He wanted to farm, live in peace, and protect his homeland. However, the U.S. government saw his return as a threat, so it sent soldiers and militia to drive him out, leading to the Black Hawk War. The Sauk, along with their allies, were far outnumbered. The U.S. forces had more soldiers, better weapons, and plenty of supplies. Despite this, Black Hawk and his group fought bravely. They even won their first battle at Stillman's Run, where they outsmarted the militia. However, the war was devastating for Black Hawk's people. The fighting ended at the massacre at Bad Axe, where hundreds of Native Americans, many of them women and children, were killed while trying to cross the Mississippi River to safety. Black Hawk surrendered soon after, knowing that continuing the fight would only bring more suffering to his people. Even though Black Hawk lost the war, his courage and determination made him a hero. In his later years, Black Hawk shared his story in a book called Life of Black Hawk. In it, he expressed sadness for his people's hardships, but was proud of his efforts to protect them. Number 9. Pontiac. After the French and Indian War ended in 1763, things changed for Native Americans in North America. The French, who had worked with many tribes as allies and trading partners, lost their land to the British. But unlike the French, the British treated Native Americans more like obstacles than allies. They took land, built forts, and stopped giving native tribes important supplies. One man stood up to fight back, Pontiac, an Odawa chief. He was a brilliant leader who believed tribes needed to unite to protect their land and way of life. His efforts to unite tribes and fight the British became known as Pontiac's Rebellion, a powerful and historic moment in Native American history. Pontiac grew up in a time of change. Born around 1720, he became a respected leader of the Odawa people. By the 1760s, Native Americans in the Great Lakes region were losing their land and freedom to the British, who were taking over French forts and building new ones. British officials, like General Jeffrey Amherst, made things worse by stopping the tradition of giving gifts like weapons and supplies to the tribes. Pontiac saw what was happening and realized the tribes couldn't fight back alone. They needed to join forces. In April 1763, he held a meeting near Detroit, calling on many tribes to unite. He gave an inspiring speech, warning them about the British threat and urging them to unite. Tribes like the Ojibwa, Potawatomi, Seneca, and Huron joined the fight. The rebellion started in May 1763 with an attack on Fort Detroit. While the first attempt to take the fort didn't work, Pontiac quickly changed tactics and surrounded it, cutting off supplies. His strategy was part of a bigger plan. Tribes attacked British forts across the Great Lakes and Ohio River Valley. By the end of the summer, Pontiac's forces had captured or destroyed 9 of the 12 British forts in the region. Forts like Sandusky and Michilimackinac fell to the native forces. Pontiac's methods were clever. He used surprise attacks, ambushes, and his deep understanding of the land to outsmart the British. At first, Pontiac's rebellion was a big success. But by late 1763, things got harder. The British fought back harshly, even using smallpox-infected blankets to spread disease among the tribes. Some tribes started making peace with the British, weakening the united effort. In 1766, Pontiac signed a peace treaty with the British, officially ending the rebellion. While the tribes didn't win the war, they did force the British to rethink their policies. The Royal Proclamation of 1763 was created because of the rebellion. It stopped settlers from moving west of the Appalachian Mountains, at least for a time, to protect native lands. Number 10. Chief Joseph. Chief Joseph, leader of the Nez Perce tribe, is remembered for his bravery and leadership during one of the most heartbreaking chapters in Native American history. He tried desperately to protect his people's land, and his famous "I will fight no more forever" speech still symbolizes his struggle for peace and survival. Chief Joseph was born in 1840 in the Wallowa Valley, a beautiful and fertile area in northeastern Oregon. The Nez Perce people lived peacefully, farming the land and maintaining friendly relations with settlers and other tribes. When Chief Joseph's father, Old Joseph, died, the younger Joseph became the tribe's leader. In 1855, the U.S. government signed a treaty with the Nez Perce that gave the tribe land in exchange for peace. However, in 1863, the government forced a new treaty on the Nez Perce, demanding they leave their homeland and move to a smaller reservation. Many of the tribe, including Chief Joseph, refused to give up their land, as they had a deep connection. In 1877, the U.S. government pressured the Nez Perce to leave. When a few Nez Perce warriors killed some white settlers, the situation escalated into conflict. Chief Joseph and his tribe tried to avoid fighting, but eventually they were forced to defend themselves. Despite his peaceful nature, Chief Joseph led his people in a desperate attempt to escape the U.S. Army. The Nez Perce traveled over 1,300 miles across mountains, deserts, and rough terrain to reach safety in Canada. They fought battles against the U.S. Army, including the famous Battle of Whitebird Canyon. Chief Joseph's tactics were brilliant, and he was able to outsmart and outmaneuver the army many times. However, the tribe's strength faded as they endured hunger, exhaustion, and constant army pursuit. Chief Joseph's people were running out of resources, and many of his warriors had fallen. Chief Joseph was forced to surrender after a final battle at Bear Paw in Montana, where the army surrounded them. After surrendering at Bear Paw, Chief Joseph met with General Oliver O. Howard. In a heartbreaking moment, he delivered his famous "I will fight no more forever" speech. He said, "I am tired of fighting. Our chiefs are killed. Looking Glass is dead. Tu Hul Hul Zot is dead. The old men are all dead. It is the young men who say yes or no. He who led the young men is dead. It is the young men who say yes or no. I will fight no more forever." Despite the hardships, Chief Joseph remained committed to his people. He continued speaking out for their rights and well-being, even as he lived in exile. In 1879, he gave another powerful speech, saying, "If the white man wants to live in peace with the Indian, he can live in peace. But if he does not, the Indian is ready to die." As we remember these warriors, we honor their triumphs and the enduring spirit of Native American peoples, which continues to shape history today. Thanks for watching.